Yizkor, of course, is a time set aside on our holidays to remember our loved ones, partners and parents, brothers and sisters, children, grandparents, and friends who we miss today and every day. And Yizkor is a deeply personal moment in our service. It is a precious opportunity to reconnect with those who helped make us who we are today. It allows us to remember our family story, which, as we spoke about in Rosh Hashanah, is part of our people's story. Interestingly, it is our desire to tell our people's story that is behind the creation of Yizkor in the first place. Most scholars believe that Yizkor originated in Western Germany in the 12th century. Its primary purpose was to commemorate the Jews who were murdered during the First and Second Crusades. The earliest reference we have to Yizkor comes from the Memoir Book of Nuremberg. This book was written in 1296 as a gift for the dedication of a new synagogue to memorialize the people in the history of the city. It's a little similar to those books that you can get about the history of communities today, like Vineland or Camden or Cherry Hill. But there's a big difference, and that's that this Memoir Book, like many others that followed, contained in it a list of Jews from the town who had been murdered, beginning with the First Crusade in 1096. The Memoir Book was added to well past its publication date to include Jewish martyrs in the 13th and 14th centuries as well. At the original Yizkor, this long list of names was read as a way to recall and remember these murdered Jews. What this tells us is that Yizkor was created for communal remembrance. It linked the living to the suffering and sacrifices by other members of the community. It helped to instill a sense of connection to a timeless community, to a people with a shared purpose and destiny. Whether by blood or by birth, Yizkor was meant as a reminder that we are all connected to something bigger than ourselves and even our families. Now this year, I very much feel the tension between the original purpose of Yizkor and how we practice it today. It is important to come together to remember personal losses, our loved ones with whom we have a unique connection that no one else shares. At the same time, this year, we know that our communal losses weigh heavily upon us. So many of our people were murdered on October 7th, and even more over the past year have fallen in battle and in terror attacks. How do we cope with so much grief for ourselves and for our people this year? How should we remember those lost on October 7th at Yizkor? What the ancient and modern models of Yizkor both have in common is lists of names. That's what was included in the Nuremberg Memoir Book and what each of us have in our own hearts today, a list of loved ones to remember. And this year there are even more lists. On Rosh Hashanah, we read the list of names of the 101 hostages that are still held captive in Gaza. Today is day 372 of their captivity. And I have also here lists of names of all those who have been murdered or killed in Israel since October 7th. There are over 1,700 names on the 9 pages of this list. We also have lists in our Yizkor book, our version of the Memoir Book, which lists names of your parents and children, siblings, spouses, grandparents, and friends, as well as the names of the 19 members of our TBS family that we lost this year. As moving as these lists are, we know that each name is a person who laughed and cried, had triumphs and setbacks, hopes and dreams, and family and friends who love them. Each name is an olam katan, a whole world that has been taken from us. There is a Hebrew poem that beautifully expresses this idea called L'chol ish yesh shem. Each person has a name, by the Israeli poet Zelda. Listen. Each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our stature and our smile and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death. We know the stories of the people who have come here to remember today at our personal Yizkor, and we will remember them in our service in a few moments. But now let us recover the tradition of communal Yizkor, as I'll share 3 stories of names of people that appear on this list. It is a small sampling of the loss that we have experienced as a people, in addition to the loss that I know that many of us have experienced over this past year. Each is a story of tragic loss, but also an incredible testament to perseverance, heroism, and life. Each of us has not only a name, but a narrative that tells our story. And it is these stories that we remember here today. Here's the first story. It's called My Dad Really Was the Strongest. It's the story of Avi Amar, as told by his daughter, Stav. She writes, I was my father's prized jewel. He was always showing me off. He would bring me to his police unit. He was so proud of me. He was this suntanned guy with the bluest eyes, not just blue, but a blue you could drown in, a sea of quiet joy and life. I was the oldest of 6, soon to be 7 siblings. When I was in school, he'd always make a point of coming to every event and every parent-teacher meeting. No matter where I went, or what I did, or what I went through, my dad was always there for me. He always gave me that feeling that everything was going to be okay. And then on Shabbat morning, October 7th, I woke up early because the whole family had planned to meet up for my birthday. It was rare to get everyone together, but we had made it happen. At 6:30 that morning, the sirens began. And already then, my dad sent a photo of himself in uniform to the family group chat with the words, I'm going in. Instead of writing back, I called him, Stav writes, and he actually answered. He always answered my calls. But later I realized that it was crazy that he answered, because I already heard in the background gunshots. He was already in the middle of the battle in Sderot. There was actually horrifying casualties there, masses of terrorists, crazy numbers. In the midst of all of it, he answers me. Ask him what's happening and start talking. But my father interrupted me and said, Stavi, let me call you back later. I replied, okay, Dad, take care of yourself. We'll meet later at the birthday party. And my father said to me, I love you. I'll take care of myself. We'll see each other later. And then he hung up. That was the last time that Stav spoke to her father. She writes, it was only later that I learned what happened. My father first went to the battleground in Sderot. He got trapped inside a police station with snipers firing at him. He fought his way out, and then, once that came under control, he left to save as many civilians as he could. He went from kibbutz to kibbutz, from place to place, based on the locations that people were sending to the police, to try and save as many as he could. And he did. My father fought in Kfar Aza, then returned to Sderot to help a family, then drove to kibbutz Saad. He waged battle and drove off terrorists wherever he could. My dad, driving his car with one hand and shooting his handgun with the other like some kind of Rambo. And then he came to Be'eri. With other officers, my father tried to drive into the kibbutz to save more people. And as they entered, a terrorist fired an RPG at his car. It suffered a direct hit, and my father was killed instantly. Stav concludes her father's story like this. That night, when they knocked on the door and informed us that our father had been killed, I went to wash my face. When I looked up into the mirror, I suddenly saw him looking back at me. At that moment, I understood that something from him is still here with me, wherever I go. And at that moment, I decided that whenever I missed him, whenever I want him to be here with me, I'll go to the mirror and look into it, and I'll look for him inside of my face. How many of you have looked into the mirror like Stav and seen the face of a father or a mother? Avi Amar was a hero, but he was also a father, a husband, and a brother. He loved his family just like our fathers, husbands, and brothers, as well as our mothers, wives, and sisters. Each of us has a name and a story. And this is just one of the hundreds of stories in the list of names that we remember today. Yizkor Baruch. May Avi Amar's memory always be for a blessing. The second story is about the Zohar family from Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Some names on this list are impossible to read on their own. Their stories are forever linked. And this was the case with Yaniv and Yasmin Zohar, along with their two daughters, Keshet and Techelet, aged 20 and 18, who were murdered at home by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. But their 13-year-old son, Ariel, had gone for an early morning run, and because of that, he survived. And Ariel's bar mitzvah was just 3 weeks after October 7th. And several days after the massacre, Ariel had one request from the Zaka volunteers who came to visit him and sat in his grandfather's home. He asked them if they could get back to his home in Nachal Oz and get his grandfather's tefillin. Ariel had been given a brand new pair of tefillin for his bar mitzvah, but the tefillin that his fathers had were special because they had been given to his father by his father, Ariel's grandfather, who was the sole member of the family to survive the Holocaust. Though 10 days had passed, Nachal Oz was still under regular rocket fire from Gaza and was a closed military zone. So escorted by special forces and under heavy fire, the Zaka head of special operations, Chaim Otmazgin, was given 4 minutes to search the residence and locate the tefillin. He entered the house and amazingly was able to find them intact, though the bag they were in had been burned. He brought them to Ariel, who was now with his 90-year-old Holocaust survivor grandfather. Ariel was overcome with emotion, and this is what his grandfather said to him. When I was 14, my parents were murdered. I survived, and today I have you, a grandson. And what happened to me at age 14, they have done to you at age 12. But you too will survive. And God willing, you will also have grandchildren in Eretz Yisrael. A child who wants his father's tefillin represents a continuity and a tradition that can't be broken. Perhaps you have a father or grandfather's tefillin, a mother or grandmother's candlesticks, something else you treasure because of who it belonged to. These holy objects got their meaning not only from the blessings we say on them, but also because of the people and the stories that they connect us to. Stories that we remember today. Yehi Zichram Baruch. May Yaniv, Yasmin, Keshet, and Techelet's memories always be for a blessing. One more story. You may have noticed that one of our Torahs has a special cover on it. It has a picture of the Israeli flag and a quote from the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, that says, Eight Sephod Veit Rekod, a time to mourn and a time to dance. It's on the Torah cradle right behind me next to Rabbi Wexler. You'll see it as it'll go around the congregation when we put the Torahs away, and we'll be using it through the month of Tishrei and through the holiday of Simchat Torah. We're able to purchase this Torah cover with our Am Yisrael Chai Fund, and it connects us to an incredible program and an incredible story. We are one of 525 communities in 287 cities in 31 countries that is participating in the global project called Dancing Through Tears. Each one of these Torah covers is dedicated to the memory of someone who was killed on or after October 7th. Their name is embroidered on the back of the cover. Now, it's Yom Kippur, so I have to be honest. The shipping of our Torah cover was actually delayed. We have yet to receive it. But I'm grateful to Peltz Day School for lending us their cover for Yom Kippur, which is what is on our Torah. And their cover is dedicated to the memory of a man named Yuval Bar. Here is his story. Yuval and his wife Mayan lived on Kibbutz Be'eri. They have 4 children and 6 grandchildren. On October 7th, Yuval and Mayan were murdered in their home by terrorists. They were 65 years old. Here's an excerpt from the eulogy that their son Itai delivered for his parents. You and your home were for me a kingdom of freedom, love, and contentment. Visiting you at the kibbutz after all the craziness of my life outside of it was like sitting on a rainbow. He goes on to joke how his dad would fall asleep in his armchair while watching Thursday night basketball games on TV, then abruptly wake up to cheer when he heard something good happening. And then he would fall back asleep again. Do you know someone like that? After sharing some more good memories, Itai concludes his eulogy for his parents. They took my amazing father and mother from me and my sisters. They took them from my nephews and grandparents they loved so much. They took them from my grandmother, her oldest and dearest son. They took from my uncles such a good brother and sister. Wherever I look, I will notice who they took you from, because that's who you are, a huge light and an open and giving heart to everyone. I'm sure you were together until the last moment, the best parents and grandparents. Watch over us from above. We miss you, and we'll miss you forever. Yehi Zichram Baruch. May Yuval and Mayan Bar's memories always be for a blessing. Well, we marked the secular anniversary of October 7th last week. On Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah this year, we'll mark the first Yortzeit in the Hebrew calendar. And on that Yortzeit, we will dance and sing with this newly robed Torah scroll, declaring that while we'll never forget what happened last year, we also are determined to not let our enemies dictate how we celebrate our holidays. Though we mourn, we will dance through our tears with this scroll and with all of our Torah scrolls. This is what we say when we mean Am Yisrael Chai. Jews do not despair. No matter what, we will always choose life. We know that it's been a year of grief for our community, for Israel, and for the Jewish people. These are just a few of the thousands of stories of loss, but also of heroism and resilience that we recall today at Yizkor. Recalling the names and the narratives of our modern martyrs of our people is painful, but it also gives us strength and hope. Just as our people remembered and cried in the past and still overcame their challenges, we will too. As the great Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai wrote, Yizkor hu min tikva. Remembering is a kind of hope. Our own Yizkor book also contains many names. Names of the people we have lost since last Yom Kippur, the names of the people we remember today. Each of these names evokes stories of loved ones. My family has names in this book too. I've often shared stories about my Bubby, who was a Holocaust survivor. And this October 7th, the story of her survival has taken on new meaning for me. What about you? What will you remember when you mention the names of your loved ones today? The strength of a father, the faith of a grandfather, the feeling of comfort from being home with the people you love, the embrace of a child, a partner, a friend. L'chol ish yesh shem. Each person has a name. And with that name is a narrative, a story that tells us about their values, their joys, and their life. It is these stories, along with the stories of our people, that we now remember as we turn to Yizkor.